when it's winter. Actually,
Oh,
considering everything in this country, I think I need to be in New Zealand all the time.
Can I send someone with you?
Who would you like to send?
Starts with a D and ends with a and first D, then T. Can you take him with you?
No. That's the whole point of leaving, is to get away from him and his tribe, the multi-million of them.
Yeah.
They have a very nice prime minister down in New Zealand. She's a really smart person. And any place that has more sheep than people sounds like a really good place to be. Sheep are nice.
We have a lot of sheep here too.
Different kind of sheep.
Yes.
I'm talking about
That was too easy. I had to say something.
Yeah, I'm talking about woolen sheep.
Yeah.
Where did our fearless leader wander off to? How are you, Donna?
I'm okay.
Great.
Oh, different
Thank you.
Donna.
Dana.
Hi,
So
Donna.
we just lost somebody, but that's okay. Do we want to start the meeting or wait
Yeah.
till our typical 7:05?
I say start.
Okay, so I am going to then indicate that we are live streaming to YouTube. We are live transcribing, and I'm going to also record to Zoom. And I'm hoping you all got some sort of message on that. So, welcome.
Can you tell me why are we live transcribing? Why the necessity to do that?
I think the only way it transcribes to our recording is if we click yes on the live transcribing. So if you're asking the question, if Greg is wanting minutes from us, this is the easiest way because nobody's taking minutes. Wait, this is all, we're still experimenting with all the new stuff.
Okay,
Teresa, so
because
let's just-
YouTube, we don't have to for the YouTube
I
streaming
know.
portion, we don't have to do that. And I don't think we've ever done it. I mean, we started doing it recently, but we didn't do it previously. And the transcript would also appear on the side. So just kind of.
Correct. There's a way to enable this transcript to be on the side instead of the bottom, but I don't know what it is.
Okay,
And in this case, we're probably going to try and, in effect, compose a letter, at least bullet points for the September 1 governing board meeting relative to the oil drilling ordinance, because comments are literally due the next day at noon. So this will just be easier, I think. It's rather interfering at the bottom of the screen. I know that.
I don't see it on mine, but okay.
You can turn it off on your screen.
You mean
I don't see it.
oh,
Yeah,
good. That means
I don't
Like,
see
yeah.
it. You have
perfect.
to
So I
activate
can't
it.
turn it off because I'm the one doing it.
Right.
So, okay. So we are called to order. My name is Laura Myers, and I am the co-chair of United Neighborhood Council's Planning and Zoning Committee. Our chair is not going to be present tonight, John Arnold, and I'm going to share the screen with our agenda and go through a little bit of housekeeping, and then we will have introductions. So I draw everyone's attention to item number 1 on the agenda, the determination to continue holding meetings virtually. And the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners and the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment have established that the Board of Commissioners has the authority to essentially adopt findings that make it clear that meeting in person would present imminent risk to the health or safety of attendees. This meeting is being conducted virtually pursuant to that directive. So next is welcome, call to order, review of UNNC standing rules for committee stakeholder voting participation, introductions and voting affirmations, and the review of this agenda. So again, I'm Laura Myers. We'll go through introduction in a moment. The UNNC standing rule says that all stakeholders are members of the committee for the evening of the committee meeting, essentially. And stakeholders may participate fully, they may make motions, and they may vote. What is a stakeholder? The City Council late last year redefined stakeholders, and they are still people who live, work, attend school, attend church, own a business, work within our boundaries, or participate in an organization that itself has an address in, and the organization is active within the boundaries of a neighborhood council. So that the new trick is it has an address in the boundaries of a neighborhood council. So when it comes to voting, you will need to affirm, you may need to affirm, because so far I know everybody on the call, whether or not you're a stakeholder. And so quickly reviewing the agenda, then I'm going to get this off and turn off my video for a minute. We have on the agenda public comments, then a look at a redesign for a case for a project at Washington between 3rd and 4th Avenue, and a look at the proposed new oil drilling ordinance, which would become an oil drilling ban. And there's also a public hearing, which is on our agenda, and I can repost it into the chat on this very topic, the oil drilling ordinance / oil drilling proposed ban, on Tuesday evening, August 30th at 6 p.m. And then we will adjourn after we follow up to have any follow-up, if any, to previous cases. So I'm stopping the share so we can all do introductions. So I'm going to pass this to Steve Peckman, and then you may pass it to whoever you wish to introduce yourself and pass along.
Hi, I'm Steve Peckman. I'm a resident of Jefferson Park for more than 15 years now. And I am the co-chair with Chris Carlson of the Oil and Gas Subcommittee of the UNNC Planning and Zoning Committee. Chris? Introduce yourself, unmute.
Okay. I'm on my husband's computer tonight, so that's why it says Demetrius Pohl. I'm Chris Carlson. I've lived in the area for 33 years now, and I share with Steve Peckman with co-chairing the Oil and Gas Subcommittee. I'm the area rep for Area 4 of UNNC, and I'm a geologist.
Teresa?
Thank you, Steve. Hi, everybody. I'm Teresa Masonette. I represent the West Adams Avenues on the board of the United Neighborhood Council, and I've lived in the area for almost 7 years.
Deanna?
Making sure that's me and not Donna.
Yes.
Dana Sales, it's good to see all of you again. I'm with 360 here representing the 3300 project tonight, just to talk to you about some of our updates.
Courtney?
Hi, this is Courtney.
Okay, thank you. Carlos?
Good evening, guys. My name is Carlos Carrick. I'm an at-large representative of UNNC West Adams. I've been a resident here for about 13 years.
Thank you. Donna Jones?
Hello, everybody. Donna Jones, West Adams Avenues. Happy to be here.
And I think I see one more person, Timur.
Hello, everyone. This is Timur. I'm with Thomas Hoffman Associates.
So thank you, everyone, for coming to the meeting tonight. I know it's not easy after a day of work. but we certainly appreciate it. Laura?
Yes. So the next item on the agenda would be public comments. And these are general public comments on anything that is within the business of this committee, but which is not on tonight's agenda. Donna.
Wanted to make sure that everyone here knows about our activity at Benny Potter Park on Saturday, the 20th, this Saturday coming, 10 o'clock in the morning till 1. It is Coffee with a Cop with the Southwest Police Department, plus several city departments, street services, sanitation, street lighting, and parking enforcement. Even if you live north of the freeway and Southwest is not your police department, please come out. You'll have an opportunity to talk with city departments, plus your SLO from the area, share it with your neighbors, as well as neighborhood prosecutor. And as I said, parking enforcement, which is a big deal in itself. And we welcome you. There will be a coffee cart, food, and opportunities to socialize with the community in the park in a safe manner. Hope you come. Any questions? Please ask.
Donna, are you able to, or maybe Teresa can, if you're not, just post into the chat the time and the address, though I think most of us know where that is, but just in case. Any other general public comments? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to, well, Dana or Courtney or whoever, are you going to screen share? And that would be Dana who's doing so. So let me make you a co-host. And you are a co-host. So if you want to reintroduce yourself and tell us why we're here. And also I'm reminded, because I was looking back at old Zooms, that our very first planning and zoning Zoom meeting, which was an experiment, you were one of the participants in that experiment. So here we are, never thinking it'd be 2+ years later.
Honestly, I kind of hope we never go back in person. I love the Zoom meetings. I think I know almost all of you on the committee after many, many years, but for those of you that don't know me, Dana Sales with 360, I've been working with Tom Safran for many years on this project. We're here tonight informationally. We have no action or anything kind of in front of you. If you choose to want to support what we're doing, that's great, but this is kind of an informational update. I think, and again, many of you were involved in this several years ago. So the general background is that we had a project, which I'm kind of going to take you through, that UNNC supported and we had approved by the city of Los Angeles back in 2019, really early 2020, right before the pandemic, for 84 units of family affordable housing at 3300 Washington, which is the old oil site. When we were going through that process, right, so 84 units of family housing, again, we worked with the community on design and all kinds of other asks. It is a former oil drilling site. And so there were some concerns from some people in the community about testing. And one of the commitments that Safran made was to promise to do testing once they move further in the project, had the appropriate funding, et cetera. Long story short, as a result of some of that testing, it has proven somewhat cost prohibitive to build over the wells in the way that they had intended to. So they've been required to modify the site plan in order to essentially avoid building over some of the wells that we were planning on doing earlier. So what we want to present to you is essentially an update. And in doing so, it actually addresses some of the wish list items that UNNC had earlier. And so I think in a lot of ways, we're actually happier with where we've ended up in Safran as a project. So really here to just kind of walk you through sort of what you had originally acted on, approved, and kind of where we're at. And then we can take some questions, but Just want to make it like we don't have anything discretionary in front of the city that requires an action, but this, you know, we've always been open and transparent with you and intend on doing so. So let me just get my share screen up here. So again, the project that we had was 84 units of family affordable senior housing. 4th Street is on the left, Washington is on the north, 3rd Street is on the right. We have the school to the east. There is a 6-story public storage building that is not part of the site. There's an alley that runs down here. The original site plan was designed essentially with a podium level of at-grade parking with garage entry off 4th Street. And the entirety of the Washington frontage was designed with retail and then active uses for the residential building. Upstairs, we essentially had a very, very regular building around 2 courtyards, all built on that podium. And again, that primary access, we were planting the street with new street trees and new landscaping, et cetera. And really the rest of the building was such. And we worked really hard with the community on design. It's built within the 45-foot height limit. We were not asking for a height increase, 4 stories. So it was 3 stories of housing above a level of at-grade parking and retail and lobby uses. It was always designed with the intention of using historic materials that were in the historic district, making it look like it was a series of buildings that evolved over time. And we've tried to maintain that going forward. So as we look at the revised site plan, let me go back here, right? The main Washington frontage was all activated. We never had any access off of 3rd Street. Some of that had to do with some conversations we have with the school because of their loading and access. We had 1 primary entrance off 4th, no access off the alley, which was frankly this committee and Laura's biggest ask, is that we have alley loaded driveway access and not impede the 4th Street frontage. So as part of the redesign, we have a number of no build areas kind of in this area. So the building has been redesigned essentially to maintain active uses along the entirety of Washington, just as it was before. We have that courtyard kind of donut, I'm going to go here, on the east, as it always was. And then we don't have any building area over this area that we're kind of restricted from, which allowed for a design of the building. So we now have vehicular access from the alley and not from 4th Street. That also allows us to have a pretty generous landscape buffer, not only on the street side, but fronting the at-grade parking. Again, this is open to the sky at-grade parking that will allow for some of the ventilation that we're required to do from environmental mitigation. And then, sorry, upstairs, the building is relatively regular. So from the street, sorry, I'm going to go back to our renderings.
So Dana, just to be clear, the at-grade open air parking is to allow for access to the wellheads in case that's necessary?
Appropriate ventilation. So they'll all be capped to current standards. The issue is to cap them to the to cap and close them to the levels that were necessary to require us to Saffron to build over them was cost prohibitive for a project that's getting public funding.
Okay.
So one of the solutions was to unburden the financial burden of the project, cap them, recap them, and reclose them, but they need ventilation appropriately. So by having surface parking, there's no structure over.
So the wells aren't filled with concrete?
And Courtney may be able to answer some of these questions a little bit better, but they will be closed.
Right at the top.
The extent of which, right, because they're deep. They're very
yes, very.
They're very, very deep. And originally the program, as Saffron would have liked to do, was to close them entirely and build over them. There were some very vocal people who were concerned about that. The commitment was they'll go out and do future testing. Future testing basically showed for an affordable housing project that does not have unlimited resources because they're basically funded with public funds. That was too cost prohibitive. So the building was redesigned to essentially avoid the wells. And And if I go back to the site plan, sorry, I'm going to jump around because the renderings, actually I can do it here, right? Some of the wells. So there's also a radius in which you can't build around. And so the most elegant solution was just to put surface parking there, and then it can be operated efficiently in the building is outside. So when we look at that from an elevation standpoint, the building essentially from Washington is exactly the same. We're maintaining the brick, maintaining the movement, making it look like it's a series of buildings evolved over time, still has ground floor retail, still has storefronts on the entire frontage, still no access from 3rd Street. It's pretty much exactly the same building for the majority of the 3rd and Washington frontages. The Washington side that will be open with a landscape hedge to buffer that. So we now will essentially have landscape new street trees, as well as then a 3-foot landscape buffer between the sidewalk and the parking area. And there will be no curb cut on 4th Street, as all of the access is now from the alley where we wanted it in the first place. So it's still 84 units of family housing. The program hasn't changed. It's just been massaged a little bit into a different program. It's a little bit more of a compact footprint. The building used to have, you know, it was a double podium. So the units were more generously dispersed around here. Instead, they're much more compact and the program is shifted around. But essentially it's the same building, just with no building edge on 4th Street.
Dana, I see that Chris has a question.
Yeah, on the ground now exposed parking, I see there's a lot of landscaping around the perimeter of the parking area. Is there going to be any tree shade on the parking itself?
Yeah,
well, I guess
so
there is some. Will it eventually be 50% of the area? I think that's what the city.
So the city requires that you plant 1 tree for every 4 parking spaces.
Okay.
As parking. So whatever, and there are requirements in the city's landscape ordinance for the size of trees and the kind of canopies in order to provide shade cover and
Okay.
heat protection on surface parking. So this is rendered essentially with the trees in the parking area for where they will be. Whether it's a 50% coverage or not, I'm not sure. I just know that they will be required to comply with the city's parking lot landscaping, which will require trees in the parking lot.
Thank you.
Teresa?
See, let me just jump in a second. Dana, Teresa's going to be the next speaker. She is our primary mover on our UNNC's recently adopted tree policy, and she's an expert. So whatever else she's going to say, I'm going to ask that you guys work with her, please, on the selection of trees.
No problem, because I am not the landscape architect. So
yeah, I know.
Noted to probably a lot of us. There is actually, and again, there's a very detailed plant palette if you need me to zoom in on anything and try and figure out what's on here, Teresa. But go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming back, Dana, because I know that you didn't have to, and you know, things have changed in the past couple of years, so we really appreciate that. I want to just go back for a moment, keep this slide up if you can, but you did mention that you're going to be altering or adding additional street trees. Can you talk about that?
So there are some existing street trees.
Right, you have medallions.
Right. The original site plan that we had, I'll go back here for a second. The original site plan we had actually required removal of a street tree. So we don't have to do that anymore. Anything that exists out there will remain. And then in accordance with Department of Urban Forestry's requirements, anywhere that we can infill essentially that 25 to 30 feet on center that doesn't impede any utilities or other requirements, we will be required to install. The plan is essentially, these are existing street trees to be maintained on Washington. We always committed that if there was an opportunity to infill street trees, we would. Some of this is subject to some of that review and plan checks, which they're not quite there at. We've really just, right now, we're essentially into planning for a substantial conformance modification that basically is just a new site plan. And then when this goes back into plan check, probably later this year, we'll go work with urban forestry and street trees. So if there is something specific that Saffron can accommodate that's sort of consistent with what you're working with. I don't think there's ever, and I'm not going to speak for, Courtney and Tamara, who are also on the phone, but anything that we can accommodate, we've always committed to doing so for this community. So if we need to work offline with you, Laura has my information, my cell phone, probably my personal email somewhere.
Thank you very much. And that I would love to do that. One of the things we're trying to do are to plant native trees when we can. And we also want trees that will give us a large canopy. And, and the street trees may not always be, the largest trees may not be the best suited for that area because they do have large root zones, but I'd love to discuss that more with you. Now, if we could talk about the parking. Yes, the goal is to have 50% canopy coverage for surface parking. Because of the wells that are there, and I can't see where the vents are. I'm not sure how that's vented. If you could show me that.
And I, again, I'm not the expert, but most of the wells are kind of in this area over the drive aisle. I don't know that.
But I mean, is it going to be like a sewer, that lid that has holes in it, and that's how it's vented? Or you're shaking your head, Steve. How is that vented? Do you know, Steve?
I'm not quite sure about that.
I'm not sure either.
I'm not the right person to ask on that one.
Okay.
But
if we could, Dana, just on,
so
I'll stay away from that for a second. Just about the
tiny little detail here.
Okay.
That says abandoned well detail. Steve, if you can read this, great.
All abandoned oil wells shall be capped
using concrete
vault with traffic rated lids. So
it says an Alhambra manhole cover and frame with a designated W.
Okay, so like a manhole.
There'll be some kind of manhole.
So there's going to be, looks like there's going to be a concrete plug, and then there'll be a type of manhole cover at the top that can be removed.
Right.
Okay. So Dana, just if we could go back to the other picture, those trees that are there, I know you said that you haven't worked out the species yet, but if we could have larger trees in that area that are going to give us a larger canopy, like a coast live oak. I mean, I'm also thinking about sometimes people have issues with deciduous trees, but a coast live oak is not deciduous, so it would provide a lot of shade for the people who have to park there. And also, can I just ask you, do we know what the substrate or the covering is for that parking? Is it asphalt or concrete?
Yeah, it'll be it's on grade, so it's likely asphalt.
Okay. And we all know how that gets. So if we could work to have larger canopy trees, that would be great. So, but I can talk more about that with you offline. I'll get your information from Laura. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and likely what we'll do is we'll bring our landscape architect into this dialogue, and with project managers from Saffron, and you guys can kind of work that out.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Cool. So one thing is, I know we'll get to add a tree where the driveway currently is on 4th Ave, where the big green blob is. Yeah, so that's an opportunity for some really great specimen tree, because the parkway itself is quite wide, Teresa. So it's a good location. And one of the reasons that UNNC had whined and begged, which we now got by accident, to have the egress on the alley, was to accommodate neighbors who had asked for diagonal parking between the alley and Washington to add some additional street parking for whatever use. So this, I guess, kind of by accident now doesn't accomplish that, but accomplishes the ability for us to now ask the city to also do that as part of this project, not Saffron. They're not going to pay for that. Are there any other questions?
I just wanted to make a comment. For people who maybe weren't here in 2019, the reason why this project is even happening is because of really important work that was headed by Michael Salmon and this committee to decommission this property. 4th Avenue drill site had not been pumping oil for a while, and Michael really led the charge on this. The Planning and Zoning Committee did a hell of a lot of work to ensure that the current operator at the time would shut down the site and remediate it, which then through the graces of then CD10 Councilman Herb Wesson negotiated that the possibility of actually having a housing development here. So this is really in many ways the culmination of many years of UNNC work dealing with this oil drill site. I just want to say that Saffron has been a good partner, although I have to say in 2019 at the meeting then we indicated that in all likelihood you wouldn't be able to build buildings on top of the drill heads there. So it's kind of interesting that that actually came to fruition. But as I recall, the discussion was pretty specific that it wouldn't be appropriate to build the buildings over the actual oil wells. But anyway, it seems like a good solution. I just have one question. This is out of total ignorance. I don't know anything about this kind of stuff. I understand the importance of tree canopy. Would a viable alternative that probably doesn't make sense monetarily for Saffron as a developer to augment where there may not be trees to have solar panels above? I know that some parking structures, Cal State Northridge, I think, has an outdoor parking structure that has these structures over the grade parking. And it seems to me it's a good opportunity for solar panels that could actually generate electricity for the buildings on the site. And if not that, is there any movement for new buildings to actually be constructed with solar panels on the roof to help create electricity, either for the grid or for the site itself? I mean, it seems to me as people become more and more aware of climate change and global warming and the need to generate energy, that we have a lot of possibilities on rooftops in Los Angeles to generate a lot of energy.
This is Courtney from TSA. Yes, we definitely can look into that. One of the issues we run into with solar panels over parking structures, just the amount of space that's required for the footings of the canopy that holds the panels. So we can definitely look into that for this project. But since we have limited space, that might be the only thing that might prohibit it.
Yeah, makes sense. My other question is regarding the trees. Having been involved in neighborhood tree projects, who's actually responsible for the care and feeding of the trees once they're installed?
That's really on us as the developer. I mean, we manage all of our own projects, which is what we take pride in doing. And so it's on us. But I don't know if you've seen any of our other projects, but we're pretty diligent about keeping all of the landscape intact and beautiful.
That's great to hear, because in my mind, there's nothing more sad than seeing a tree put in that no one cares for it and it dies. That's just a really horrible situation. So yeah. I appreciate that Saffron's taking that responsibility. Thank you.
Right. So, Teresa, I see you have your hand up, but I just wanted to follow up question to something that Steve was saying. So question for Courtney. Maybe, or an idea just out of the blue, maybe something like a shade pergola structure over parts of the parking lot with different kind of solar. The solar that could power the electric plugs for the electric cars to charge themselves. So that wouldn't be like powering the whole building. So it might be able, there may be a way of figuring out a more limited use of solar that's real specific and create some shade with, I'll just call it pergola kind of structures in that area. And I'm making this up. It's not like I've ever seen something like that.
No, I hear you. We can definitely explore that. It just has to do with the amount of space allowable in between the parking spaces. That might be the only issue I could see, but we'll look into it.
And Courtney, who are we saying hello to?
Sorry, this is Courtney DeBakis. We've met before back in 2019.
No, no, no. I
I'm
mean, I'm hearing
Oh,
in the
my
background,
kids.
someone saying
My
hello.
My kids, yes, sorry.
I know, Courtney, you and I have met.
Yes, I know. Well, now I have 2 children since
Okay.
I've met with you. Yep. So sorry for the background noise.
No,
but-
it's fine. It's fine. Teresa, then Chris.
Thank you, Laura. I just wanted to answer Steve's question. Steve, yes, we have actually probably last year or so, 2 large developments that are coming in. One is CIM, and I can't think the other one that have their rooftop solar ready. So they will be putting solar panels in the future, but we're talking to them and asking them to have their rooftops available for solar or prepared for solar.
Chris.
I just wanted to compliment both the developer that having to have such a major kind of shift in the design, that you were able to maintain the number of units, because housing is so critical, and you've been able to maintain many, the streetscape that was very important to the community. And overall, I think it's a very successful pivot, and I appreciate especially that you were able to keep the housing units the same.
Okay. So thank you, Chris. Dana has to leave. We have another item. Are there any other questions, comments on this, or may we move on to the next agenda item, which coincidentally also has the word oil in it?
And as I
Okay.
said, we're not looking for you to take anything formal. If you as a group say we're really happy with the direction and we're happy to keep supporting it, feel free. If not, right, we're not going anywhere.
Okay. Well, I feel what we're going to ask you to do, the broader you, meaning Saffron and you, is loop Teresa in, and she's got great ideas, and she's well connected to urban forestry anyway.
Great. So Teresa, Laura has all my info and can get that out to you.
And Chris, your hand's still up, but did you mean for it to be down? Okay. All right. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next item.
Okay.
And this one I'm going to be formal about because we will be voting tonight one way or another. Case number CPC 2022, or so 2022 4648. I have no idea what CA stands for, and it's also a City Council file 17-0447. So the CPC part of this means it's going somehow to the Planning Commission. So it's a proposed change to the existing oil drilling ordinance, and it's basically a proposed outright oil drilling ban, though it will take possibly 20 or more years for it to phase out. So what we're doing tonight is a review of the new draft oil drilling ordinance, which would prohibit new oil and gas extraction, phase out existing extraction operations, and thereby, and I'm reading from a press release, you might tell, but it's also our agenda item, thereby protect the public from a range of risks associated with oil and gas extraction. Rather than just imposing setback requirements, this ordinance goes further, amending the Los Angeles Municipal Code to prohibit all new oil and gas drilling activities and to make any currently existing extraction a non-conforming use in all zones of the city, with the end result being the phasing out of all oil and gas extraction activities in Los Angeles. Right now in Los Angeles, there are 26 oil and gas fields and over 5,000 oil and gas wells, some active, some idle, and some abandoned. UNNC's footprint includes both active and former oil drilling sites. So this is a discussion and action item. Steve is going to be the primary conductor of the conversation. And our goal before we end at 9 o'clock tonight is a recommendation to our governing board, which will be meeting on September 1, and the comment period ends on September 2. So we don't really have another opportunity to do this. Our committee's next meeting is after the governing board's next meeting. So Steve, I know you can share the screen, but the question I have is what order? I mean, I can share while you chat.
I can share the screen. Did you want
Right,
me
but what?
did you
Well,
want
we
me
have a bunch of different things. We have the actual ordinance, we have the press release, we have the public hearing notice. I may have more than you have. We have the fact sheet.
Can I make a recommendation?
Yeah, that I'm asking you to.
Okay. How about if I start out with the slides that were shown on Saturday?
Perfect.
Okay, let me share screen. Can everyone see the slides? Oil and gas drilling ordinance?
Well, I can. Everybody?
Yes,
Anybody?
we can see it. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, great, good. So Laura and I attended a meeting on Saturday that was, part of it was led by Office of City Planning. And they showed these slides. So I'll just review these briefly. Laura went over a lot of it. The press release is what a press release is, but this is kind of the city's official presentation. So let's see if I can make this happen here. Here we go. I'm going to skip. Well, so this is the city planning oil team and how they're organized and what they're working on. There's the zoning administration folks, there's code people, and they're all under the oil team. There are a bunch of agencies, both within the city and outside of the city government, that are responsible for overseeing oil and gas production. There's CalGEM, who is responsible for the remediation of well sites, plugging and abandonment of oil wells, removal of pipelines. There's the Air Quality Management District of the South Coast, which deals with demolition processes, the State Water Board, which is supposed to oversee the soil cleanup, the Office of Petroleum and Natural Gas Administration and Safety, the fire department, and has two parts of it, the Certified Unified Program and the Oil Wells Unit. So interestingly, in the previous project that we spoke about, the one at 4th Avenue, that was a closure of an oil site in our neighborhood. And actually it was the Office of Petroleum and Natural Gas Administration and CalGEM that actually went back to Saffron and said, you know, you can't really put buildings over the oil wells. So all these agencies need to be coordinated and work well together in order to close down a site and ensure that it is safe and the site can be reused after it's remediated. We have to remember that all of these oil and gas drilling sites are essentially toxic sites. So Laura told you the general background. We all are familiar with the potential negative health and safety impacts of oil and gas operations. And there are a lot of facilities that are sensitive, that are in close proximity to well sites, not to, including our homes, schools like on 4th Avenue, places of worship, recreation areas, even healthcare facilities. Next to the Murphy site on Adams is a healthcare facility. And of course, there's a disproportionate health impact on these frontline communities. Laura indicated there are 26 oil and gas fields and more than 5,000 wells in the city, active, idle, and abandoned. During the conversation on Saturday, one of the participants asked if the abandoned wells includes those wells that are actually in the front or backyards of homes. If you've ever seen any photographs of LA in the 20s and 30s, you'll see oil wells right in people's homes. And they weren't sure whether this abandonment plan includes those old oil wells before the city consolidated oil and gas into districts. So as we know, a lot of these sites are in low-income communities and communities of color and our community, which is covered here by South LA. Let's see if I can move this down. There we go. The draft ordinance. I'm being told my internet's unstable, so I'm going to hang on a second. Here we go. So the draft ordinance in summary. instructs the Department of City Planning to create an ordinance that would prohibit oil drilling citywide. The ordinance intends to ban new oil and gas drilling activities, cease and remove all existing oil operations within a 20-year timeline, promote equity for all communities impacted, ensure economic opportunities of property owners, and promote environmental justice and clear air for all neighborhoods. Again, this is just about the city of LA. The city of LA has no authority over anyone else, like Beverly Hills or Santa Monica or Culver City, Burbank, things like that. What does this mean for existing operators? Operators will, according to the draft ordinance, will have 20 years to phase out their operations. During the 20 years, operators will be prohibited from expanding their existing operations or extending the life of a well, or from seeking discretionary relief from provisions of the ordinance. Planning will have authority and process to call back operators when they are not acting in good faith or posing a nuisance or danger to the surrounding community. So why 20 years? Non-conforming sections of the code requires a 20-year phase out after the use becomes a non-conforming activity. This was enacted in 1952. The amortization study is pending. It wasn't clear exactly what that study was about. That was asked on Saturday, and the city folks didn't actually have a very good answer for it. But it's going to be overseen by the petroleum administrator in the city of LA. And there'll be possibility for future code amendments depending on the amortization study results. So abandonment and remediation. So since these are toxic sites, the biggest issue is going to be what happens when operations stop, how will the site be remediated, and what will that process look like? Interestingly enough, abandonment and remediation is not part of this ordinance because the city is claiming, at least in the draft form, other local and state enforcement agencies are responsible for overseeing these activities. Now, I'll make a comment about that at the end of this slide presentation. Council motion includes instructions for the petroleum administrator to craft citywide policy that would require wells to be remediated within 3 to 5 years of shutting down. And the planning, of course, will be coordinated with the petroleum administrator. So what will the draft ordinance accomplish? Existing oil and gas sites may not increase intensification, they may not expand their land use, and they may not establish new wells or drill sites. And the timeline, as Laura indicated, the draft ordinance was released last week. There's a presentation and public hearing on August 30th, City Planning Commission in early fall. So that's kind of where it is. And this is all posted on the UNNC website. You can get these addresses. They have information in both English and Spanish, including the ordinance and the frequently asked questions. So one of the things I did want to go back to before I kind of open this up is the abandonment and remediation. To me, this is one of the most important elements. And unfortunately, it's actually missing in terms of having a role in the ordinance itself. So there's a financial cost for remediation, for abandonment and remediation. It costs a lot of money to close down a site. So if the city is actually forcing companies out of the oil and gas business within the city limits, the question is, how does the city actually hold these operators financially responsible for the safe and effective shutdown and long-term cleanup of the toxic sites? So there's nothing in the revised ordinance about creating tools such as sufficiently funded interest-bearing bond or escrow accounts initiated by the company to ensure there are adequate funds available in the future, 20 years from now, for shutdown and complete necessary toxic cleanup. Without such a fund, oil companies will close operations and walk away, and the city will be left holding the financial bag, either for protracted and costly pursuit of such companies through the legal system or doing the cleanup with taxpayer money. Neither of these methods will avoid the city paying the costs for shutdown. And it's important that the city not allow vendors to walk away with years of profits and no responsibility for the costs of shutdown and cleanup. So that's kind of where it landed with the presentation by city planning. another point I'll make regarding the presentation last Saturday was that there was no one there from the Petroleum Administrator's Office. And when asked whether the operators have actually been in discussion with the city about the crafting of this ordinance, they said no, they had not been involved to date, but they're beginning to hear from them. So that's kind of where the process is at this point. Any questions or comments?
Steve, it's Laura. Are you recommending that the draft ordinance be revised to include a process to guarantee remediation and not abandonment?
I think that, yeah, sure, I would make that recommendation, but I would like to hear what others have to say about this before getting into formal proposals.
Got it. Chris?
It's not only very concerning that the city would pitch this out of planning without having even vetted it with the Office of Petroleum Engineer, who currently has regulatory oversight for inspections, and it's the only muscle that the city has in its charter to really, oversee a lot of the day-to-day issues of the operation. And there's no apparent indication it's been vetted by the city attorney's office either. And it's got holes in it that would be concerning to anybody whose goal was to see a safe evolution to closing the wells and phasing out the industry. It's extremely concerning because it appears to kind of, the city is magically turning over all oversight to these other agencies, at the same time not utilizing the powers that they currently have. And it's quite worrisome. I would be very loath to endorse this as a path to the stated goal. When they look at outcomes, what this will do, it would appear to put the city into decades of legal, it'll put them in court, and that will cost a great deal of money, that will take funds out of the city for things like housing and improved infrastructure. So it's very concerning that this basically came out of planning and maybe some blessing out of the mayor's office, but it didn't seem to go through the kinds of organizational input that one would want to see for a major program that you would want to go well with a long-term positive outcome. So it's really concerning to me.
Chris, do we know that it hasn't been seen by the city attorney?
As far as I could dig, I haven't seen any evidence. One of the things that I would think we would write is a request to make sure we get input from the city's attorney, vetting of the proposals it stands before we move on any kind of endorsement, because the last thing we need to do is speed the city into more legal liabilities.
So I hear you. I think if they haven't had the city attorney involved in it, I don't understand what they're doing. In addition, I think the concept of making sure there's adequate funding for this project. I wonder if there's a way to fund it through the assets that are the taxes provided by the companies that actually use the facilities currently. Right, to tab that, so they're not taking funds out of other programs.
Yeah, it seems blindly aspirational without any meat on the bones to how you get from point A to point Z. Right. It's really troubling.
Okay, Laura?
Yeah, well, I'm able to check, and I'll do that while we're going through this meeting, to see if the city attorney has or has not been involved with this council file anyway. So I'm going to scroll through and see if I can do that. It seems so interesting. at the same time that they're also doing this whole proposed revision of the Mills Act. So I know these are not related things, but with the Mills Act, they're saying, you know, we want to impose fees on everybody, right? We want to have people pay, in effect, annual fees for every 5-year inspection. These are new fees. We want to do that. And we're going to take responsibility, we, LA City, and not work with the other agencies and not make them responsible for things. And they have never worked very well with the other agencies that are involved with that. So although it's a completely different level, there's no danger to public health. It's interesting that on this one, they're saying we're going to create the problem, meaning we're going to solve a problem, but at the same time, we're going to create a problem. But we're going to let those other people over there who may not wish to be involved then solve the resulting problem that we're creating, which is a likelihood of abandonment.
Yeah, I think
A
that,
likelihood of
yeah,
abandonment.
you and Chris are making important points in that area, and it brings up the history of the petroleum administrator and the absolute lack of coordination among the agencies that the petroleum administrator is responsible for coordinating.
Right.
And so, you know, I guess the question is, you know, you kind of write a broad ordinance as a city government and then hope the details will be filled in by different parts of the city government. Is this one of those areas where the details actually need to be fleshed out within the ordinance?
Right. I think it is, and it's otherwise so many ordinances that city planning writes end up having the law of unintended consequences. But we can see, I mean, I don't mean that it's an intended consequence, but it kind of is. I mean, they're not planning for remediation. They're in effect planning for abandonment.
Yes, exactly. And that should be avoided at all costs. Because the city will end up paying and the community will end up paying as a result of abandonment.
Right.
And going after a company that declares bankruptcy or has left the operations, right? Then they have to go after the property owners. And I just don't see the city doing that either, particularly when one of the major property owners is the Archdiocese.
And has the Archdiocese been in conversation with the city? Because
Right.
that, at least in our area, you're right, the Archdiocese owns our major active well. It owns, as you go easterly in West Adams, it owns the other wells, drilling sites, as the underlying landowner. It doesn't own the operation, but it owns the
Well,
land.
it leases the site for the operation, right? So the Archdiocese has an income generation through the oil operations. But I'm just thinking downstream, if a site is abandoned by an operator, goes bankrupt or decides they no longer want to do the business anymore,
Right.
the only recourse the city has in order to fund remediation of a site is to sue the property owner.
Right.
Meanwhile, the point I was trying to make is that the actual operator is the one that's profited off the site for years and is yet going to leave the cleanup to the community. To me, that's just fundamentally flawed.
Okay. So, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I mean, yeah. Is there anybody else on this meeting? Oh, Donna has her hand up.
The city in the last 3 years since COVID has basically abandoned most of what their jobs are, almost in code enforcement in many areas. They use COVID or pandemic as a reason for not doing things. So under every circumstance, you have to make sure there are eyes on the people that are supposed to protect you. So it really worries me because if they're not willing or not thinking in terms of doing things that will protect the communities that are around or at, and leaving almost it with the people who are creating the problem or helping them create the problem, we're in big, big, big trouble. Do realize that they have COVID brains now, and we have to really write it in to make sure we have to fight all the way. That's all we do is fight now to get them to do the job they're getting paid for. Sorry, that's just my feeling.
Well, Donna, I think you make some really important points, and probably the most significant point in my mind is the importance of making sure that things that we feel are critical are actually written into the ordinance in some way that gives the city teeth to be able to accomplish the goals. Right? So I would say this is a very bold initiative, and that it's something that could, potentially be done with the right kind of inputs into it and with the right kind of language. But the skeletal structure that we've been provided in terms of the draft ordinance doesn't do enough to actually spell out processes and responsibilities.
Well, I'm not going to make you any happier. I've just been looking through the council file, and the city attorney has definitely filed, over the recent years, stuff about this, and it's all confidential. So what I'm seeing are multiple one-page memos saying we have filed a confidential report.
Yeah.
So I don't remember. I'm already too farther along in this meeting to remember why we asked the question about the city attorney, but we're not going to know the answer.
We asked the city about the city attorney because, as Chris said, it's important when crafting an ordinance that has such broad and deep impact,
right,
and potential for decades of lawsuits,
right,
to ensure that the city
Huge
attorney
liability.
provides input.
I mean, huge liabilities to the city.
right.
And
So
it's staggeringly not addressing anything in a practical way. It's really smoke and mirrors, and it almost looks like something that somebody wants out there for an election piece, and they won't ever have to deal with the downstream results of it.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to phase out an industry, say you wanted to phase out airports out of Los Angeles, you were just going to phase out all airports because airports are sources of pollution. You would first start with sitting down at the table with your users to find out what they would need to be able to work to a position to accomplish that, and look for commonalities where you could move forward. There's been no input from the industry itself. In fact, they were brushed aside. None of their input was even, because we have operators that, yes, have been here a long time. And we have operators that only been in their particular, purchased something in the last few years. So it's not like they've got great income that they've made off of a site. So you've got different amounts of investment, different timelines of profit, and built into this is this it's all going to be dependent on this amortization study, which it might not happen in my lifetime. So there's no teeth in this for anything, and it's just almost insulting that this is how the city would put something of this importance out. It's quite frustrating. Sorry.
I just want to add one thing about the city attorney, at least in my experience. It's one of the most least creative agencies within the city, and oftentimes is the office of just say no to good ideas as well as bad ideas. And I would just hope that people in the city who are participating in trying to craft this initiative are doing it with goodwill, right? Because I think this is important. The reasons for wanting to stop oil and gas in our neighborhoods are clear, right? They're toxic sites, and they're not good to have next to our houses. On the other hand, in order for the city to be safe, there needs to be a lot of thought and precaution put into the crafting of such an ordinance. And Swiss cheese ordinance isn't going to cut it.
So I think what we have here is the big idea is going to be popular with most Angelenos. and it should be popular, meaning eliminate oil drilling in Los Angeles, and not just try and define it by is it in a residential area or not, just eliminate it. That's the big idea. You know, I'm not 100% sure if the conversation in Wilmington or, you know, that area at those neighborhood councils is going to be the same as ours. You know, it may be that it's also a giant employer, you know, in some of our southerly areas of Los Angeles. But the big idea is good. And it goes hand in glove with the other big idea that's moving its way to ordinance, which is eliminating gas-powered buildings, right? You know, by 2035, I think, that you're not going to be able to build a building that has gas, but many developers already are not building buildings with gas. So CIM, the new CIM building at Western and 24th is going to be all electric.
So I guess, Laura.
So those are big ideas
Yeah.
that we probably support. But the way this is written, I feel like our position is all the things we've been discussing. It's like they haven't thought it through. They don't have anything real for remediation. They don't have anything real to guarantee against abandonment. I mean, nothing in place, no thought process on it. And Steve, you'll remember that at the meeting on Saturday, I even brought up, is there anything in the ordinance, because I hadn't read it yet, that would just say in words out loud, it's not likely you can build a building over an abandoned, you know, like we're learned earlier tonight. You probably have to not build on top of former active oil wells, even if they've been remediated. You probably need to build around them. And whichever of the two women was the one taking notes said, oh, we hadn't thought of that. I'll take a note. And it's like, you didn't think of this before? I mean, in other words, it's not just that it wasn't there, they hadn't thought of it.
So I guess what, there are two things I would like to do. One is I'd like to know if there are any other comments or questions from people at the meeting. And the other is then I would like to make a couple motions because I'd like to carve this up into manageable bits.
You know, that becomes really unmanageable at the board meeting, but go ahead. But Teresa has her hand up first.
Thank you, Laura and Steve. One is that we have participants who were not here at the beginning of the meeting. So if we could just restate what a stakeholder status is, so we're all on the same page with that. Everybody's going to vote. And also that I have a question about the building we just talked about, but I'll wait till later, but I just don't want the meeting to end before I have a chance to ask that question regarding those sites.
Sure. Right. Because it does feel like we're on a theme tonight. You know, okay. So in case we have people here tonight who were not here at the beginning of the meeting, at UNNC, all stakeholders can participate equally in our committee meetings. They may make motions and they may vote. And these votes that we take here are recommendations to the governing board. They are not final decisions. A stakeholder is defined as someone who lives, works, owns property, worships, you know, owns a business within our boundaries and or participates in a nonprofit organization which has an address within the boundaries of UNNC and which itself participates in the community. So it has activities here. And that latter piece was a redefinition of who is a stakeholder by the city council about a year ago. So, so anyone who is a stakeholder may vote tonight.
Great. So before I get into making a couple motions, does anyone else want to comment or have a question or want to make a statement?
Richard.
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. I just wanted very quickly to point out that the original council file motion to draft this ordinance directed the Department of City Planning to work with the city attorney on the drafting of this motion. And I just wanted to assure you that that collaboration has been very robust and has been occurring throughout the process.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah,
I
Richard,
guess in my mind, that's kind of disappointing to hear that it's been so
well.
robust, because that's what they came up with. It's to me, it's disappointing.
Yeah,
Right.
but that said, I also wanted to just add that, I think the point about remediation is very important. And, and perhaps, if we think that this idea is a good idea, that, to start the clock on a 20-year countdown of the phase out of these toxic land uses in our neighborhoods, then, I think we'd want to be sure that the city addressed the remediation and cleanup issue as well.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else? Carlos, we haven't heard from you. Would you like to say anything?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to make a motion, which is that we recommend to the governing board that the Planning and Zoning Committee recommends that the UNNC support this draft ordinance in concept only. And that there are a series of elements that would need to be worked on before it could be fully supported. And we would need to see that in the future, because as it's currently drafted, there are too many potential problems and omissions that could result in negative downstream effects for the communities that the ordinance is trying to help, as well as for the city writ large.
Okay. I got lost after as it is currently drafted, noting that I'll have the transcript, but if you can remember what you just said, I'll type.
I don't remember because I just made it up on the fly.
Okay. Well, we're gonna have it, but
if I had written this all out, I would have just sent it to you.
I understand, but so basically, and I know I spelled things wrong, the TJRRE is there and orked is worked. So, but basically, as it's currently drafted, it leaves open too many questions that are unresolved. That's not what you said, but is it what you meant?
Well, I think I think there are a lot of detail that need to be discussed and inserted into the ordinance in order to protect the communities it's trying to help and to as well as the city writ large.
I would also ask that, since there has been robust input from the city attorney's office, that the input be shared with the public so we know because there will be legal responsibilities, there'll be lawsuits against unlawful taking, and this can eventually come to not only waste years of time, it can cost tens of millions of dollars. It could eventually come from city coffers. And the city's got a bad track record of wasting too much of its resources on failed lawsuits. So I would absolutely require that the city share what the findings of the city attorney's office is on and what the pathway to go forward with this vision really comes down to from the legal side, because who wants to go out of their way to absorb a bunch of lawsuits?
Right, but did you want, or more importantly, do you think UNNC would even support any aspect where we are talking about not doing this because we're afraid of lawsuits? I understood what you I understood what you said, but as we craft a motion to take to the board, and we have a board that's like ourselves, probably in concept, like the idea of eliminating overtime oil drilling in Los Angeles, do we want to be taking them a recommendation that frets about lawsuits?
I would suggest that the concern of, I share the concern about lawsuits,
Mhm.
but I think we can craft it in a way that it's not about lawsuits. So for example, Chris just mentioned, why is this ordinance not a government taking? Right, we haven't heard that addressed. I tried to get an answer about that on Saturday and they couldn't respond. So, and then the issues about lawsuits also arise in terms of abandonment and remediation, which is if they don't have sufficient detail about how abandonment and remediation will occur, and including who's going to pay for it, then it leaves the city financially responsible for these sites. And so rather than craft it frame it in terms of lawsuits, I think we should frame it in terms of the cost to the public, the financial costs that we have not seen evidence that the city has satisfactorily addressed these issues.
Okay, how about it leaves the city itself financially at risk?
Sure. Richard, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, thanks, Steve. Just a couple things quickly. There's a robust case law established that governments have the authority to declare a land use non-conforming and to phase out that land use. So there's a reason why we don't have dairy farms in Los Angeles anymore. There's actually probably a lot of reasons, but that's a non-conforming land use. The city of Culver City actually took this very same path about 5 years ago. They declared in the Inglewood, the part of the Inglewood oil field that's within the Culver City, which is about 40% of that field, they declared it a non-conforming, they declared oil extraction a non-conforming land use and began a phase out period, a clock basically ticking down. The county is doing this now. LA County is doing this now as well. And so there's just, there's not condemnation of the land that happens. There's no takings here. It's just the government exercising its authority to end a land use and provide a phase out that allows the owners to recoup their initial financial investment. So that's just a very well-established, there's well-established legal precedent for that. And the city, I think you can be assured, the city has thought about this so carefully. They do not want financial liability. And so, they've researched this extensively before making, even before the council would pass this motion. There was a lot of concern about legal liability. And, I think those concerns have been, well allayed.
Thanks, Richard. I guess my point would be is that I haven't seen any evidence of what you said, right? And it's incumbent upon the city to bring that information forward as part of the background information of the ordinance in order to seriously engage in a dialogue with the community. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I have no reason to doubt what you're saying is true. But unless the city comes forward with the documentation in terms of the background of the ordinance, I don't feel comfortable supporting the ordinance as it's currently crafted.
I know that Chris has her hands up, but I do want to also say something here. They do make it clear somewhere in the ordinance and certainly in the fact sheets, Richard, that cities are legally allowed to declare land use non-conforming. And I am guessing that dairy farms is a really good example. But all they have done to this point is say that they're allowed to declare a land use non-conforming, and that the time frame may change, depending upon the results of the amortization study. So I would question why we're trying to adopt this change to the municipal code without already having the results of an amortization study. Because, you know, the city kind of said in 1992, liquor stores are non-conforming uses. And therefore, in South LA and in certain other geographies, they're going forward, they all have to have a conditional use permit because they're non-conforming uses. And lo and behold, this year, they're suddenly revisiting that because it ended up not applying to all liquor stores or all places that sell liquor. So now they're kind of scrambling, and this is 30 years later from that initial declaration. So, and that's the other point. You can get a conditional use permit when you have a non-conforming use. So they have made a point in here to say, we're not going to allow you to get a conditional use permit for this non-conforming use. Is that not a taking? I mean, to Chris's point, and I don't know the answer, but what if it's going to take longer than, in this case, 20 years for XYZ operator to amortize his, costs? I guess that's what the amortization study is. It's about making sure that the entity that's made an investment of $20 million, whatever the number is, has already earned its $20 million back. But they're rushing. This time schedule seems like a rush. They release it on the 9th of August. The hearing is on the 30th of August, and it's going to Planning Commission this fall. That's a pretty fast timeline for something like this. So,
Chris?
yeah. So this is a half sentence, not a full sentence. I just added to the chat.
Chris, did you want to say something?
I lowered my hand because, again, Laura made the point. It's very dependent both in timeline and outcome on the amortization study, which has not even happened.
Yeah.
And so it's just, Swiss cheese of holes in this thing. And, it's very concerning that the city would rush something out on this timeline without providing substantial support for the path to get from A to Z. What does that 20-year window look like? Where and how is the money for remediation and reclamation going to be acquired? When is it going to be available? How is it going to be timed to deal with the sites that, based on the amortization study, that are going to be coming up in a staggered time window? It's just, there's nothing, there's no there. It's just a big idea and nada to tell you how you're going to get it done. And that's concerning because in the process, the city is abandoning its tools that it has in terms of inspections and in terms of a petroleum oversight that, it's somehow all going to be handled by these external agencies. And I don't see any evidence that those external agencies have been involved in the discussion to date. So it's very concerning, and it's not something I would, at this stage of immature development, would want to attach my name to.
Okay.
Donna?
Yeah.
Like both of you said, if it isn't written down, if it isn't written totally out, it didn't happen. That's all I have to say.
I agree.
Okay. So here's my suggestion. I mean, we do have 30 more minutes, but we're not going to write a letter in the next 30 minutes. We're going to do a motion at best. But again, I remind you, we have a deadline of September 2nd to provide a communication. If we want to provide a communication in this phase, and we won't even know that till the night before. If we sort of pass a general motion like Steve is suggesting to make a recommendation to the board, but our subcommittee, the oil and drilling subcommittee, are you able to have a meeting between now and a week from now or so and go, I'll have this whole transcript and draft longer bullet points.
I think one of the most troubling thing is in the window that we have, we do not have a representative at CD10 that represents us, that could inform us, that could share the so-called intel that the city council has about this thing, and then could represent us. It's
Okay.
We are.
That's nice, but that wasn't my question. I agree with you. I think we all agree with you. We'd like to have a representative. We would like to have a different timeline, but that wasn't my question. Here's my question.
I'm happy to craft bullet points.
Right, but can we say that because you're a subcommittee, you don't have to have a Brown Act compliant, public meeting if you don't want to. Can we say that the subcommittee will meet, even if you guys meet by Zoom, because and you can draft, somehow draft some bullet points, assuming we pass this motion tonight?
I'm happy to participate in that.
Okay. All right. So back to the motion, which kind of, drifted off, but
well,
motion,
there was one motion and then there were some concepts I wanted.
Yeah, I'm back up at the motion. So I'm scrolling up the chat. It says motion, we recommend to the governing board that it support this draft ordinance in concept only.
That's it. That's the motion.
Okay. You didn't want to say there are a series of elements that need to be worked out.
That's a second motion.
Okay. So the initial motion is, I'm going to copy paste it back. Yeah, eliminate the little note I was taking about Swiss cheese. It's filled with holes. That would be Steve's motion right there. And I'm feeling like Teresa was shaking her head that she's seconding.
She has
Or
her
not.
hand up.
Or
Yes,
not.
I will. What I was going to say was that original portion was way too long for a motion. So now that it's shortened, I will second this motion.
Okay. So let's vote. So Richard, I think in this case, you're not a stakeholder who can vote. I'm sorry to say.
Laura, I think I work in the UNNC neighborhood council, so I think that would make me a stakeholder, right?
I thought you worked at Redeemer.
I do. And
Redeemer is based where?
where, you mean our parish or our offices?
No,
or?
where do you work at Redeemer? What's the address? Is it an address within UNNC?
The address of our office is not within UNNC, but we still work within UNNC.
Yeah, no, that's the thing, that is what the city council changed overtly against UNNC's desires, that's for sure. They now require that the organization have its address in the boundaries, and literal address.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
And I'm sorry, because it wasn't about you. We asked them not to do that. We said in South LA, lots of organizations don't have brick and mortar. They don't care.
So anyway, I think everyone else in attendance is a
Yeah.
resident or stakeholder within the UNNC.
Right. Okay. So let's just raise our hands, either yellow, virtual, or for real.
Steve Peckman's hand is up.
Okay, so we've got Carlos and Donna. Are you voting?
Donna's hand is up. Teresa's hand is up.
Right. So it's only Carlos that we've let.
Well, Carlos and Chris.
And Chris, maybe they're voting otherwise. So
Right.
you
Oh,
have
Chris. Got it. So how many yeses was that?
So we have Laura,
4 yeses.
Donna,
Well, I don't know.
Teresa, and Steve. 4.
Okay. So who's voting no?
Chris is
Chris?
voting no.
And so however Carlos is voting, it won't change the outcome. Okay, so that motion passed. Now,
So
do you have more motions?
Yeah, so my second motion is, given all the discussion points that we've had so far tonight, that the Oil and Gas Subcommittee of UNNC Planning and Zoning Committee meet and craft those bullet points into something that could be presented to the UNNC governing.
Right,
board.
that's, you can do that. We don't need to vote.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, the UNNC, as it were, the governing board will need to vote. They'll say yes or no.
yeah, okay, fine. So then we'll try to work something out based on
Right.
the elements of this discussion that occurred this evening.
Yes, but I would appreciate it if you could do that by the end of next week with, a deadline of the 26th of August, because this is the kind of thing that we should put in the agenda packet real early and distribute to the board.
Okay, I will do my best, and I will work with Chris and whoever else wants to participate in that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, anything else on this item? Okay, moving on. Oh, and I'm going to post the how to get onto the meeting in a minute. So don't leave if you want to know how to log into the oil and gas ordinance meeting. Follow up to previous cases, ENS and old business. And board members, I think probably widely, got a copy of an approval on a case that we were dealing with at Manhattan Place and Washington Boulevard. And we supported it. We wanted to have more better trees, better basically. But what happened is that even though online in case summaries in ZMIS, it showed that this case was on hold and that the public hearing had not been waived. So John and I were monitoring this. They actually assigned a staff member and deemed it complete on a Monday and issued a decision on a Thursday and just emailed it out and mailed it out as well. So I wrote and said, we did support it other than we wanted some additional trees. But, why is it that what it said online is that the hearing had not been waived? So, it's possible that members of the community were holding their thoughts or not until the public hearing. That still shows, I checked it again yesterday, as the hearing is not waived, but the decision is made already. And so that was the question. And then they wrote back and said, well, the trees we don't have anything to do with. We can't control what kind of landscaping or trees that they use. It's up to, thank you, Teresa, up to urban forestry. And I was like, oh yeah, good. I haven't recontacted them because they didn't even answer the part of the question, or they kind of dusted it right past it, of the how come it says online that the case is on hold and the public hearing has not been waived. I mean, not that the trees were the least of it, but they aren't the most of it. The most of it is, why are they doing it this way? But having then said that, I haven't responded further because I am concerned that why are you approving the landscape plans and then at the same time saying you have no control? So, it's a combination of weirdness. So I just wanted to update, but it was a project we like a lot, from a design and use program point of view. And, it had some oddness to it, like a currently existing location for a failing street tree, but it's a street tree location. They're showing as some pretty plants and not a tree. So that's just the weirdness to it. So that's my update. There doesn't appear to be much that we can do about it other than hope we at some time get a council member so we have some backup when we have these kind of discussions with the planning department, because we have no backup at the moment. So that's my only update. Does anybody else have any? Chris? Teresa? But you're muted, Chris.
On that project, is there any indication when this public hearing will be scheduled, or?
No, obviously there's no public hearing. Is the project's approved?
Oh, it's approved, even though.
Yeah, I mean, in other words, they have on the website that the public hearing is not waived.
But they approved it
There's
anyway.
It's clearly waived because they've made a decision.
Okay,
Or maybe there never was going to be a public hearing.
got it. But
I mean,
it's been
kind of
approved.
hard to know, but we had in effect a public hearing our own, but that's just us. That's not necessarily the person down the block, or,
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, it's just disappointing at best. And what I'm noticing is that essentially, in general terms, they've stopped even posting the submitted documents for a lot of the CPIO cases, and they're just making approvals. And, this is, again, mostly about not having, in my opinion, not having Council District 10 representation. So there's nobody kind of saying to the planning department, wait a minute, you need to make sure that you've heard from the neighborhood council and made sure that they've seen the plans. I mean, there's just nobody doing that at this time. And, we were used to having an active team at Council District 10 who, for good or bad, always said, we stand with our community. And what we mean is we stand with the neighborhood council. And what we mean is tell the neighborhood council what you're going to do before you do it. And then we'll tell you if we want to support, CD10 will tell you if we want to support it or not. Yes, Steve.
I just have a practical question and follow up to the oil ordinance. Is there a way for you to send me the transcript of tonight's meeting?
Yes, it's going to be a notepad document. It's going to be easy.
So you can send that to me?
Correct. That's why I've been torturing myself with watching the words at the bottom of the screen all night long.
Because that'll be helpful in terms of putting
Yeah.
something together. I could go.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I'll have it by the morning. Teresa.
Thank you, Laura. Also, Steve, just so you know, we are streaming live. So tomorrow, the video is there now, but the transcript will be, Google has to run through a system, but the transcript will be there tomorrow too. So you'll be able to view it and read the transcript if you need it.
So I can read it on YouTube?
You can read it on YouTube. You can copy and paste it out of the weird tech notepad thing that I'll send you.
Yeah, the notepad might be easier to work with.
Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't, because it makes up words, just so you know.
Yeah, well, just like ORP.
Yeah.
I know what it means though.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask my other question now, if
Please
we're done
do.
with all that stuff. Okay, so one of the slides that Dana showed, the parking area with the trees, there were about 12 capped wells. I say 12, I don't know, it could be 10, but they were in that L shape, the yellow. So I wanted to ask Chris and Steve, when she zoomed in and showed the actual well, it seemed like it was capped with about, I don't know, 2 feet of cement, and then there's going to be a manhole cover. So I guess my question is, and they did that so it can vent. What are those emissions that are going to be coming out of that? I mean, is there someone who comes by and tests that, like, you know, the EPA, or how is that regulated? Why is it not being filled completely? And are the residents going to be having methane gas or other things?
Those are all good questions, Teresa.
Yeah.
And I guess tonight was the first time I heard about venting being the reason for this change.
Yeah.
I don't think that's correct.
Yeah.
Chris, what do you think?
It's first time I've heard this venting argument, and normally it's about being able to access should you have any
Right.
issue
That's what I
in the
think too.
future that you can get back in to address
Right.
any issue. And it wasn't about venting. So certainly, you know, it's concerning that if that's what the developer's been told it's about, I would want more information and, you know, and want, just like, you know, at Murphy, they put a baseline, the operators installed a in real time air quality recorder to monitor any fumes. You kind of, if really they're concerned about gases being vented, you'd want something to be monitored in that case. But it may not be what is really driving the ship, but it was not well presented.
Yeah,
Right.
I thought that was real. I agree, Teresa, it was really problematic. As I recall from 2019 and our conversations and what transpired afterwards, it was exactly what Chris said. CalGEM wanted access in case there are problems, and you can't have access if a building is sitting over it. I don't recall ever reading anything about venting the well. That doesn't make sense to me because it's supposed to be plugged.
Yeah, it's supposed to be
Right.
capped.
But it is only black. It seemed like 2 or 3 feet there. The whole thing wasn't plugged, just that top.
That's why I asked the question about that. It's not clear to me whether they're pouring in concrete or they're just plugging it. I don't know the answer to that one either. But I think it's worthwhile to follow up with Dana Sales and ask her to provide the documentation about whether it's for venting, because that would be very concerning.
You know,
Why were they building housing there if they're venting the wells?
Right,
okay.
exactly. I don't think that's why I don't.
I'm
think
trying to jump in. I'm looking at the plans. It doesn't say anything about venting. It says they are concrete vaults.
Right.
So
Well,
it would be very difficult.
They're already vaults. They were constructed as vaults.
I understand, but then that little diagram that she showed off to the right is identified as a concrete vault.
Yeah.
And it is only the top of it. They're just showing the design of the immediate top. I think what she was, I don't think it's for venting, because that would concern me, because then you think about the methane explosions up in the Fairfax district.
Laura, but she was on record tonight.
I know
that that's the reason. So I
that
think
doesn't mean she was right.
Yeah.
Well, we should say
my
she's
point
right.
is that
You
it's-
don't change it.
My point is that it's worth following up with her and getting the she claimed it was for venting. We would like to see the documentation that supports that claim.
Right. I'm not disagreeing. Go ahead, Teresa.
Thank you, Laura. I was going to say, if you could email her and then include me on, because you know, we talked about the landscaping and the trees, and that we all had questions about that venting or those manhole covers or whatever the hell they're called, and she could provide us further clarification on that. But it can be presented to her as part of the landscape. What I'm concerned about, this is a personal thing, is that I came in, we had 2018, we were working on Crenshaw Crossing, and I came out of nowhere and then blew the whole thing up. And I don't want to do that. I want to be, you guys have been working on this for a long time. I don't want to come in and, you know, throw a big wrench in everything. So, but I do think it's a legitimate question, because if she used the wrong terminology, that it's cleared up.
Right, and what I'm trying to jump in and say is that Michael Salman sent a whole bunch of documentation to John and myself that I didn't read. That's exactly about this. And the only part I was interested in was telling John, we need to bring Tom Safrantine out and let's look at the new facility.
So again, regardless of the documentation that Michael sent, she made very specific claims this evening that she needs to provide documentation in showing that CalGEM's purpose is to vent. Otherwise, she needs to retract that.
Okay, I understand. And we'll say it's for clarity.
My understanding is that part of having that additional kind of vault on top of a vault and the manhole covers is it allows you to locate the actual wellbore location. It's not that somewhere out in this parking lot, there's 28 wellheads. You actually know exactly the position of each of the wellbores.
That's right.
I've never heard of a venting issue. So she,
Right.
even if she misspoke, if she's misthinking, she needs to be asked to clarify so that they have a clear understanding of what they're being required to work with, not kind of a hazy sense that
Right.
somehow these things.
Well, my other concern is that the landscape plan does show whether they're large or small trees right in that same location. And are they trees in pots, or are they, because if they do need to get in there, I don't want to kill a bunch of trees.
Yeah. and you're
Well,
not
when you
saying
say
it should be
they,
right
who are
on
you
top of
talking
the
about?
well.
Well, you mean in the future if they need to get into?
Correct.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the roots are going to grow around. I mean, the way it appeared to me that there was a row and then a row of manhole covers, and the trees were along here. So the trees will the roots will go wherever they can. They're not going to be able to penetrate the vault anyway. So.
Right. Yeah, but if they have to dig everything out, the trees will go, as opposed to that the roots will go. But the set of plans that I have don't include the landscaping. I mean, in other words, what she showed today.
Right.
What
It was not in the
so look at,
packet. So.
correct, is not in the 8-page version that I have. I can see where the wells are, but I can't see where the landscape sheet is not in our packet. However, when I look at the video, I can stop it at that location and do a screen grab and put it in the agenda packet. So we'll see what it is. So I kind of wonder if the trees down the center that are anywhere near the center are in big pots and not in the ground. That was my question. If they're going to be, if some of this is
I
not
thought she said in-ground planting, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
No, that's what she said.
Yeah, and if we're going to work with them, then we can say we prefer to be in-ground planting.
Right. Well,
And
if
then
they
we
end
can-
up doing a shade pergola down the center with some
Oh,
solar
yeah.
panels, then there won't be trees in that location anyway.
Yeah.
So, because a shade pergola is, oh, well, take it down, put it back up, right? I mean, that's not a building. That's easy enough. Because again, I really thought the whole thing, over these last couple of years was going to be about they should not be building a building. And then finally they were told you cannot be building a building over the wells, because in case you have to go back in 10 years, there can't be a building over it. So, we all heard that. I don't remember from whom we heard it. Might have been Michael, but we heard it loud and clear when we were looking at this case.
So yeah, before tonight's meeting, I went back and reviewed my notes from 2019. And a couple people actually voiced the concern about building a building and essentially creating double jeopardy for people who are already underserved and under-resourced by putting them in housing over an oil well. Michael said that he couldn't believe that that they would be approved to put the housing over the oil wells, and was that a mistake? And actually then CalGEM reviewed it and told them that they could not put the housing over the oil wells.
Right.
So, I mean, we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Michael's leadership on that project on 4th Avenue. He really pulled all the weight on that. I'm glad he's continuing to send you information. But again, I think, if she's going to make certain statements at a public meeting, then it's incumbent upon us as the Planning and Zoning Committee to follow up with her and make sure that those are accurate statements.
Okay.
I don't believe it is accurate to say that they're for venting.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you, but I'm hearing what you're saying about making a correction. Because the truth is, she shouldn't be saying that to Building and Safety or to the Planning Department either. If she may be saying it because she believes it.
Yeah, but it's in fact the worst advertising for their project.
I understand that.
Who wants to live in a building next to a vented oil well?
Yeah. Exactly. Venting what? Methane?
Yeah, well, it's venting methane, exactly.
Yes, but that's the thing. If you are I don't know what the PC word is, but a poor person, and you have limited choices in housing, then that's maybe where you have to live. And then once again, it goes to how people in certain socioeconomic strata have to endure environmental injustice, you know,
That's right.
so.
Right.
Yeah.
That was
But
very
it
much a part
also-
of the discussion in 2019. Very much.
Oh, they did a lot of things with batteries in East LA, as I recall. So
Yeah, they did.
you cannot trust them. And I don't understand how they're even building any housing on top of that.
Well-
I still am trying to understand. So
Yeah, but you know what, Donna? A lot of us live in housing above the other two abandoned oil fields that we forget were abandoned here. The Good Shepherd oil field was all of Angeles Vista and Western Heights. I mean, you know,
What's just. I think what people don't remember as well, though, is where that site is on 4th Avenue. The actual ending of the well isn't there. Right? It's spread out everywhere. So, for example, my house sits on top of an oil well that goes to Murphy, but I'm on 30th Street, right? They do this slant drilling and it all comes up at Murphy, but that's not where the well is.
That's right.
Do you get a check, Steve?
I do. And you can't imagine how angry the previous operators were that they were sending me a check when I was the one who was out front on the oil issues in the community.
Well, I get one too, Steve.
And
so
you know,
it doesn't stop us, does it?
No, it doesn't, because you got to do the right thing. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
But what I'm also saying is it reminds us when we're having this discussion about what would be venting and hopefully nothing, but we are all living above major methane underneath us that used to be extracted. I mean, you know, in other words, it's there and it pops up every once in a while, mostly elsewhere in unsavory ways. So that's my concern, frankly, about the unexpected, unconsidered impact of shutting down all the oil drilling is not just who's going to remediate those visible wells, but where is that methane going to pop up? Because it is underneath where we are, you know.
Well,
Anyway.
we also live downwind of the 10 freeway.
That too, but I'm talking about over the years. Yeah, I grew up here. Over the years, you know, explosions here and there of methane.
Yeah.
So, yeah, here and there, just like the sidewalk explodes. So, you know, is it going to get worse if we're not drilling? If we're not extracting, I guess is a better way of saying it. Not if we're not drilling, but if we're not extracting, because I don't know the answer. I am not a geologist, but Chris is.
I would not lose sleep over that thought myself.
Okay. So wait a minute, you're
There are
not
lots
watching
of other
that.
things to lose sleep over.
Yeah, you're not watching that NBC show called, is it La Brea, that would have the big hole in the earth that people dropped to and went back to the fictional dinosaur times. Anyway.
Yeah, that's
It
Hollywood.
happened. I remember 3rd and what was it, Fairfax?
Yeah.
When it was actually blowing up all the time.
There are natural hazards in this world. Yes.
We live in California.
The La Brea tar pits still bubble and brew, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
La Brea means tar.
Yes, it does.
Steve, will you give me a call after the meeting so we can coordinate?
I'm not going to be able to give you a call after tonight's meeting, but I'll send you an email and try to get some dates and times that we can meet.
Okay, I need to give you a heads up. Tomorrow morning, I'm on an airplane. I'm going to be out of the country until the 1st of September.
Okay, so this committee will, where will you be, Chris?
I will be able to look and communicate.
So if I draft something and send it to you, you'll be able to provide input.
Yeah.
Great. So let's do that.
And I would also circle out to Michael and ask for, you know, some positive because he's kind of been involved on the west, some of the west, and he's got some more up-to-date sort of questions that we might want to incorporate.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Okay, it is 4 minutes to 9. And we should adjourn the meeting unless there's anything else.
No, I want to thank Teresa for bringing up that venting issue because I had noted it, but I didn't bring it up. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we will not light any matches as we drive past that.
As you drive past 4th Avenue.
Yes, yes, right. And pray for the children on the corner.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's a
Okay.
crazy
Okay.
mixed up world. Thank you.
Good night.
Okay.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna end the